You walk into a room, and before anyone says a word, something in you already knows. Your coworker had a bad morning. The couple by the window just argued, even though they're pretending everything is fine. The meeting is probably going to run long because your boss is carrying his shoulders somewhere near his ears. Nobody told you any of this. You simply walked in, and within seconds, your brain had started reading the emotional weather of the room. For most of your life, you've probably had a name for this. Overthinker. Too sensitive. Anxious. Reading too much into things. Maybe you've even used those words against yourself after exhausting hours spent trying to explain a feeling you had no obvious evidence for. And then, annoyingly, you turned out to be right. Here's the part you may never have been taught. Heightened sensitivity to subtle information isn't automatically a flaw. Some people naturally process environmental and social cues more deeply, and research on sensory processing sensitivity suggests that this trait exists in a meaningful minority of the population. The problem may not be that your system notices too much. The problem may be that you were never taught how to use what it notices. Today, we're going to break down what I'm calling vigilant intelligence, not as a clinical diagnosis, but as a useful way of describing a mind that constantly monitors its environment for subtle patterns, changes, and potential threats. We'll look at why some brains seem to scan a room before conscious thought catches up, the 10 signs this pattern may be showing up in your life, and the crucial difference between detecting something and feeling responsible for fixing it. Because once you understand that difference, something changes. Let's start with the science. In the 1990s, psychologist Elaine Aron and her colleagues studied what they called sensory processing sensitivity, or SPS. The trait describes people who tend to process sensory and emotional information more deeply, notice subtle stimuli, and become more affected by their environments. Estimates often place the trait somewhere around 15 to 20% of people, although the exact prevalence depends on how the trait is measured. That distinction matters. Sensory processing sensitivity isn't the same thing as anxiety, introversion, or a mental disorder. A sensitive nervous system can be uncomfortable in some environments and highly adaptive in others. That idea connects with research by developmental psychologists Bruce Ellis and Thomas Boyce. In their influential orchid dandelion hypothesis, they proposed that some people are more environmentally sensitive than others. Dandelions tend to function reasonably well across a wide range of conditions. Orchids are more affected by their environment. Put an orchid in poor conditions, and it may struggle. Put it in the right conditions, and it can flourish. The interesting part isn't that sensitivity makes someone automatically better. It doesn't. The interesting part is that the same sensitivity that creates vulnerability in one environment can create advantages in another. And that brings us to something happening much closer to the nervous system itself. Neuroscientist Stephen Porges introduced the term neuroception to describe the nervous system's automatic detection of cues associated with safety and danger, operating outside conscious awareness. The broader idea is important. Your brain and nervous system don't wait for you to consciously analyze every face, voice, posture, or change in tone before responding. Some information is processed automatically. You don't consciously calculate every change in someone's voice. You don't measure the exact angle of their shoulders. You don't mentally record how long their smile lasted. Yet somehow, you can walk into a room and feel that something has changed. Research on thin-sliced judgments, including influential work by psychologist Nalini Ambady and colleagues, offers another piece of the puzzle. People can sometimes form surprisingly accurate impressions from very brief observations of another person's behavior. The brain is constantly extracting information. The important question is what happens after it does. Think of an ordinary smoke detector. It waits for a particular signal, and when that signal crosses a threshold, it reacts. Now imagine something closer to a radar array. Multiple streams of information are being monitored at once: voice, posture, facial expression, timing, movement, context, history. A blip appears. You notice it. But noticing the blip and knowing what it means are two completely different skills. That's where things can get complicated. Nobody chooses to grow up constantly scanning the emotional environment. Sometimes the habit develops because it was useful. Maybe you grew up around an unpredictable adult whose mood could change the entire atmosphere of the house. Maybe you learned to read someone's face before asking a simple question because the answer depended on what kind of day they were having. Maybe you became the person who noticed conflict before everyone else did and tried to prevent it before it exploded. In other cases, the pattern can develop through stress, temperament, repeated social experiences, or simply a naturally heightened sensitivity to environmental information. Whatever the origin, the brain can learn that monitoring is useful. And once a system becomes highly practiced, it doesn't always know when the original reason for the practice has disappeared. So what does this look like in adult life? Here are 10 signs. Sign 1. You read the room before you're technically in it. The hallway can tell you something before the meeting room does. You hear the voices through the door and already sense whether the atmosphere is relaxed, tense, distracted, or unusually quiet. Your partner's key turns in the lock, and something about the sound tells you what kind of evening this might be. You're not necessarily making a conscious prediction. Your brain is picking up patterns. Sign 2. You notice expressions that disappear almost instantly. A flash of irritation gets replaced by a smile. A moment of hurt appears before someone says, "I'm fine." Someone's expression changes for a fraction of a second, and while everyone else continues talking, part of your attention has already registered it. That doesn't mean every micro-expression you notice is meaningful. It means your attention may be unusually sensitive to small changes in social behavior. Sign 3. You feel that something is wrong before you can explain why. This can be one of the most frustrating experiences. Something feels off with a person, a conversation, or a situation, but you can't immediately produce evidence. The feeling arrives first. The explanation comes later. Sometimes the pattern you detected turns out to be real. Sometimes it doesn't. That's an important distinction, because intuition is not the same thing as certainty. Your brain can recognize patterns without consciously knowing how it recognized them. It can also misread incomplete information. Sign 4. You remember tiny details other people forgot. The comment someone made 3 weeks ago. The unusual pause before they answered a question. The exact tone they used when discussing something they normally don't care about. You may not be deliberately memorizing any of it. Your attention simply tags certain details as relevant, and those details remain available long after everyone else has moved on. Sign 5. Group settings exhaust you in a way that has little to do with talking. 10 people don't necessarily mean 10 times more conversation. They can mean 10 simultaneous streams of information. Facial expressions, posture, voice changes, side conversations. Who is quiet? Who suddenly stopped laughing? Who keeps checking their phone? Who seems uncomfortable? Other people may leave a gathering tired from participating. You can leave tired from processing. Sign 6. You notice the exact moment someone's energy changes. The words haven't changed yet. The subject hasn't changed. But something underneath the conversation has. Their voice becomes slightly flatter. Their responses become shorter. Their attention moves somewhere else. You register the shift while they're still saying essentially the same things. That can make conversations feel strangely predictable. You notice the change before the explanation arrives. Sign 7. You've often been the person who just knew. You sensed a friendship was fading before the eventual argument. You suspected a colleague was planning to leave before they announced it. You noticed that a relationship had changed long before anyone officially admitted there was a problem. People may call this intuition. Sometimes it is. But a less mysterious explanation is often available: pattern recognition. Your brain may have been collecting dozens of small signals that never reached conscious awareness individually. The final feeling feels sudden. The data behind it may not have been. Sign 8. You over-prepare for ordinary social situations. Before a difficult conversation, you've already played out 5 versions of it. You imagine what they'll say. You predict how they'll react. You rehearse your response. Then you rehearse the response to their response. From the outside, this can look like anxiety. Sometimes anxiety is genuinely part of it. But another possibility is that your brain is trying to reduce uncertainty by simulating possible outcomes. A detector that is highly uncomfortable with missing information will naturally want more information before taking action. Sign 9. You notice the gap between someone's words and their behavior. "I'm fine," they say, while their arms remain tightly crossed. "Don't worry about it," they say, but their voice has become noticeably colder. "I'm happy for you," they say, yet something about their expression doesn't match the words. You don't automatically believe the body over the language. You simply notice the mismatch. And for a highly observant person, the mismatch itself can become the most interesting piece of information in the conversation. Sign 10. You feel responsible for managing the emotional temperature of the room. This is where heightened awareness can become exhausting. You change your tone because someone seems irritated. You make a joke because the room feels tense. You stay quiet because you think speaking might make things worse. You become the mediator before anyone asks you to mediate. Eventually, you can start treating every emotional shift as your responsibility. That's the trap, because awareness and responsibility are not the same thing. Look at all 10 signs together, and a different picture starts to emerge. You may not have been making things up. You may simply have been paying attention to information other people weren't consciously tracking. But here's the part that needs equal emphasis. Noticing something doesn't prove your interpretation is correct. A sensitive detection system can pick up real signals. It can also generate false alarms. Someone can cross their arms because they're angry, or because they're cold. A person can answer more quietly because they're upset, or because they're tired. Your brain can detect a change without knowing its cause. That's why the goal isn't to trust every feeling blindly, and it isn't to ignore every feeling either. The goal is to become better at separating signal from interpretation. So how do you actually work with this system instead of fighting it? First, stop trying to force yourself to become less observant. Telling yourself to relax doesn't automatically change how your nervous system processes information. Instead, create a gap between detection and obligation. When your radar says something is off, you don't have to immediately become responsible for it. Pause. Ask yourself 3 questions. What did I actually observe? What am I assuming it means? Is it my responsibility to do anything about it? That tiny separation can change everything. You saw the crossed arms. That's observation. They're angry with me. That's interpretation. I need to fix their mood. That's obligation. Those are 3 different things. Keep them separate. Principle 2. Treat recovery as maintenance, not weakness. A system that constantly processes social information needs periods where it doesn't have to process anyone. Silence can help. Low stimulation environments can help. Time alone can help. Even simple periods without constant conversation, notifications, or social demands can give your attention a chance to reset. Recovery isn't something you earn after becoming exhausted. It's part of maintaining the system. Principle 3. Choose your environments deliberately. You can't completely control what your brain notices once you're inside a room. You can control which rooms you repeatedly enter. You can choose relationships where communication is direct. You can limit environments built around constant conflict. You can recognize that some group sizes drain you more than others. Remember the orchid metaphor. The environment doesn't just determine how comfortable a sensitive person feels. It can influence whether that sensitivity becomes a liability or an advantage. Principle 4. Aim the radar instead of letting it run everywhere. The same attention that makes a chaotic dinner exhausting can become incredibly useful when you deliberately apply it. It can help you notice a negotiation shifting. It can help you recognize when a team member is struggling. It can help you detect inconsistencies in a conversation. It can help you understand what someone needs before they find the words to ask. The difference is intentionality. You don't need your radar running at maximum power in every room. You need to learn when it's worth turning toward the signal. And then comes the cost nobody talks about. When you stop doing emotional labor automatically, some people may notice. The friend who depended on you to sense their mood without saying anything may suddenly have to communicate. The group that relied on you to smooth over tension may experience more uncomfortable silence. Someone may even describe you as distant. That can hurt. Because when you've spent years managing emotional environments, people can mistake your labor for your personality. They may think you were simply easygoing. They may not realize how much attention was required to make everyone else comfortable. But you don't have to keep paying that price forever. You can care without monitoring everyone. You can notice without intervening. You can understand someone's mood without becoming responsible for changing it. And eventually, something unexpected happens. The radar doesn't disappear. You simply stop treating every signal like an emergency. That's the real shift. You begin trusting your observations without worshipping them. You become curious about your intuition without treating it as proof. You learn to ask for evidence without dismissing your instincts. Most importantly, you stop apologizing for having a mind that notices things. Think back to that room from the beginning. The coworker having a bad morning. The couple pretending their argument never happened. The boss whose shoulders were practically touching his ears. Maybe you really did notice something before anyone said it. But the goal isn't to become someone who is always right about what everyone else is feeling. The goal is to become someone who can notice without becoming consumed. Because heightened awareness becomes exhausting when every signal feels like a responsibility. It becomes powerful when you decide where that attention deserves to go. So, out of these 10 signs, which one hit you the hardest? Was it reading the room before you even entered? Feeling completely drained after social gatherings? Noticing the smallest change in someone's behavior? Or being the person who somehow just knew something was wrong before anyone admitted it? Tell me in the comments. And be honest. Sometimes the sign that makes you slightly uncomfortable is the one that reveals the most about how your mind actually works. If this video finally gave you language for something you've experienced for years, hit like and send it to someone who is constantly reading every room they walk into. Subscribe to Mindframe Psychology for more videos about the hidden patterns behind human behavior, perception, and the machinery of the mind. Until next time.